People who have surprisingly woken up admitted into a hospital. What happened? I hopped into the back of a mate's pickup after a rugby game, went to sleep and woke up in IQ traction with no feeling from my waist down. Turns out we had a head-on collision with a drunk driver and I went through the back of the cab picking up a host of broken body parts including 4 compressed vertebrae. A year and a number of surgeries later I walked out of hospital an inch shorter and with enough metal in me to set off metal detectors as airports. I was the lucky one. The other 3 guys in the truck never woke up afterwards. 20 years and it still gets me. 18-year-old me got super wasted on Smirnoff watermelon vodka at some little club in Clearwater, FL. Apparently I fell off of a tall brass stool and busted my head. When I woke up, I wasn't even sure what state I was in. Accidentally called my friend's mom in North Dakota trying to get a ride to somewhere other than the hospital. A decade later and I still can't drink anything with that watermelon flavor. Happened when I was in kindergarten. Apparently I fell down the stairs after stepped on my own trousers. If this were in cartoons you'd still be okay. I was 12 in 1982. Woke up in a hospital bed feeling fine. No idea what happened. Nobody else in the room. Last person I remember hanging out with was my friend, Scott. So I call his house. His mom answered. Advised me to call my parents. No answer at the home phone. So I'm sitting in this bed, trying to figure out why I'm even there. I finally discover that the rolling table over the bed opens up, and there's a mirror under the lid. Across my forehead and down the whole right side of my face are fresh abrasions. Oh, that's why. Finally get hold of Scott and learn the story, which I still don't remember. Was riding my bike down a sidewalk near the grade school. Sidewalk takes a 45-degree left turn, and I cut the corner. Grass is deep and a little wet, and my front wheel catches on the edge of the sidewalk, flipping me over. I landed on my face, dragged against the other edge of the sidewalk, knocked out cold. Another neighborhood kid was in the area, hustled back to alert my parents. My dad took me to the hospital in his car, and I woke up the next day. Yes, my parents just left me in the hospital by myself. Was at the pool. Next thing I know I wake up in a hospital bed, feeling very cold and my throat hurts. Turns out I had actually drowned, but the lifeguard had pulled me out and reanimated me for about 45 minutes. Then I was flown to the hospital by helicopter, where I lay in a coma for 2 days, during which they kept my body temperature low, to prevent cerebral damage caused by lack of oxygen. I could go home a week after the accident. My brother and I were outside playing with squirt guns. This was 2001 so I would have been 11. Next thing I know it's Easter Sunday. I was in a hospital bed with a massive headache and blurred vision and the last thing I remembered was 4 days ago. Apparently I fell backwards and smacked my dome on the curb hard enough to fracture my skull and bruise my brain. Got 2 weeks off of school which was cool back then and I've had to wear glasses ever since. Apparently, according to my mom, the first sign of consciousness in the hospital was me getting out of bed, taking a pee on the floor, and then going back to sleep for 2 more days. The whole thing was a weird experience. Diabetic. Went to sleep normally. Woke up 2 days later in the hospital. I got too low while sleeping that I passed out. Fortunately the time I passed out was close to the time I am supposed to wake up. My brother found me half dead and took me to the hospital. Was knocked out by flying squirrel while bike riding near my house. I was running a half marathon with a friend and we had just passed the 10-mile mark and I felt like I was getting into a groove after I struggled a bit the previous few miles. Woke up the next day in the ICU with my family all around me. Heat stroke and rhabdomyolysis. I was admitted with a temp of 108.6 and they were telling my family to prepare for the worst. Had to stay in the hospital for a few days and then take it easy for a few months but otherwise came out unscathed. Don't recommend it. I'm a running coach, and you'd be surprised how many runners who fall ill with heat stroke mention finally feeling smooth or relaxed or in the groove right before they collapse. Sometimes they even stop sweating, say they feel better, then hit the pavement. I was watching Voyager on TV. Next thing I was in a hospital bed. Turns out I'd gotten up too fast, lack of blood flow to the head and passed out, hitting my head on the floor hard. I'm 6'6" and fractured my skull. Confusing. Was at school, about 8 years old. It was sports carnival day. I don't know if they have that everywhere. It's where the whole school spends the day competing in various sports. I was watching the other group play t-ball. Next minute, hospital. I woke up feeling like I'd just had a dream that I was in an ambulance. Apparently I did briefly wake in the ambulance, but not for long. I was thwacked in the forehead with a flying metal bat, had a massive abrasion which turned into the oddest scab you'd ever seen, like a unicorn had his horn lopped off. Still have a scar there where my skull cracked and healed with a kind of divot in it. Woke up in the hospital summer of 2002, cuffed to a hospital bed. Tubes all over me and stitches all over my chest. The night before I was hit by a drunk driver. Had a 6-inch gash down the center of my chest exposing a few ribs. After I was discharged, I spoke with the gas station attendant who told me that he denied the driver a beer sale because he was already wasted. That butthole was never found. That was pretty bad, but apparently I woke up in a daze a few hours earlier. Doctor had me sedated and arms secured to the bed because I was trying to pull my catheter out. I didn't die in a motorcycle accident. It was a pleasant surprise. Cut a guy off while bartending in college. He wasn't too happy, grabbed a bottle, and chucked it at the back of my head as I turned around. Woke up in a hospital bed with my best regular and his wife ensuring me I'd be okay and the guy wouldn't be a problem. Super reassuring, other than the fact this was a pretty unsavory biker bar and the regulars, though amazingly kind and loyal to me, weren't the most savory human beings. 38 stitches, a partially shaved head, and 3 days later I was at lunch with the same regulars. Where am I? Hospital. You were airlifted here. Family's in the next room. You had a car crash. Give it to me straight. Doc, how disfigured am I? Hey, you're not. You're messed up, but still have all your parts. Family comes in. Doc leaves. Doctor won't tell me. How fricked up am I? Paralyzed? Lose a leg? Neither. Don't bulls me. I can't feel my legs. You have an epidural, idiot. And you've also been out of your skull on morphine for the past X days. How could you tell? I just woke up. You've always been conscious. High as a kite, but conscious. Combo. Okay, then. Nap time. I sleep, then wake up upon next doctor check-in. Where am I? Repeat this for 9 days or so. Then I finally start retaining memories again. I wonder if he ever had a bit of fun during the time you couldn't remember anything. I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're now just a head in a jar. Had a seizure at work and was apparently walking into walls and fell down in the bathroom. My mom came to pick me up, brought me to my place. I fell down and had another seizure and my mom called an ambulance. All I remember was going into the bathroom at work after puking in my lesson room. I woke up in an ICU with everyone telling me that I had brain cancer and that I only had 2 weeks to live. They started chemo treatment immediately at Cedars and now I'm completely clean of cancer. Woke up in the hospital with my roommate and her mom asleep in the chairs in the hospital room. I started freaking out because I was 7 months pregnant and my pregnant belly was obviously not pregnant. My screaming woke them up. My fiance and I had been hit by a drunk driver, killing my fiance and I lost the baby. I had been in a coma for 3 days. I have some really gnarly scars that my kids like to make up crazy stories about. My favorite being the time I fought off 3 knife-wielding psychotic carnies and murdered them with my bare hands. Mine is kinda boring. Driving my car and bam, suddenly everything is slow motion. Then I'm in the ICU naked and so high on morphine. Saw the light and everything. Apparently another car driving 70 miles per hour T-boned me. This stuff terrifies me. I'm confident in my own ability to drive. It's other people I worry about. Fell off monkey bars at a playground and was knocked unconscious. Remember waking up in a hospital bed to a doc telling my parents about some metal in my head x-ray and then them taking my ponytail out. Metal was in my hair tie. I was 16 and hit by a Ford F350. I am a tiny human. I'm under 5 foot and this truck hit me going 40 miles per hour when I was in the crosswalk. The hit launched me across the entire intersection. I don't remember anything 20 minutes before until 10 days later. When I woke up finally I had been in a coma for 5 days. Both my lungs had collapsed. I had 3 blood transfusions, a chest tube to drain the internal bleeding, 3 surgeries and the whole left side of my body broken. I couldn't walk and my vision and memory had been damaged. It's been 6 years and I'm doing great now. You wouldn't even know anything happened to me except I have memory issues and arthritis. But I like to think I came out on top in this situation. I was at a party with a friend in some college town. The street we were on had these 3-story apartments built side by side. The whole street was partying, even on the roofs. We got separated and it was time to go. We don't live in that town. Anyways, I see an ambulance going down the street and knew it was for my dumbass roommate. So I follow the ambulance and sure enough, he was laying on the ground, barely conscious. He tried to jump from one building to the next and didn't even come close. Luckily for him, his head broke the fall. A few weeks later he finally asked, "Oh yeah, hey man, that night we went to Lawrence and I woke up in the hospital. What happened?" I was shot in the stomach at about 2 feet range by a guy who had the gun in his backpack. He was in the process of robbing a store when I walked in, and I didn't see it happening as he had the gun hidden, and a lot of other people in the store didn't know either. I asked him if he was in line, because he was kind of to the side, and he turned and fired. I don't remember anything from after entering the store. The rest I've had pieced together. He shot me 3 times, hitting mostly muscle, but also one kidney. I'm entirely fine today, but that was a fairly alarming realization of how close I came. Walking down the road one night, proper side of road in reflective gear, headed to the gas station for some MT, dew and smokes. Suddenly it's 2 days later and I'm strapped to a hospital bed. Apparently I was hit by a Mitsubishi 3000 GT. Kid driving was coming from a rave, high as a kite, and thought I was an angel in my reflective gear. He tried to catch me with his bumper. Fun times. Wife, 2-year-old son and myself went to visit a couple of friends out in the country. Had some food. Had a couple of drinks myself. Had an amazing time. Wife was sober. I was wrangling my young one back into his car seat to go home, because he was overtired and unhappy but made sure he was good and snug. Pulled out of the driveway after waving goodbye to our friends. I came to almost a month and a half later. I could barely move my legs and arms due to neuropathy and fatigue. I had a feeding tube up my nose and a colostomy bag. The doctors told me that I had actually come to a couple days before while I was still in intensive care, but the nature of the anesthetic they had me on meant I kept kinda waking up, fading back and forgetting everything. At this point I was able to remember things normally. They told me right off the bat my son was fine, completely unharmed and in the care of a very old and dear friend with 3 kids of his own already. My wife was alive and relatively uninjured with the exception of some damage to her leg and a moderate brain injury that she would recover from slowly. They kept the details about the accident from me for a few weeks while I was recovering, but basically my wife missed a stop sign in the middle of a dark, poorly marked country road and we got T-boned by an SUV. Other driver was fine. It's been over 2 years since the accident. I got the strength back to walk again, but because of pins, bolts, plates in my left ankle and shin I'll never likely be able to run again. The neuropathy in my legs wore off, and eventually wore off in my arms to the point where I can use them normally again, but it was a lot of therapy, retraining, time. Suffered PTSD about 10 months after by the time I was back at home. From time to time, I still have nightmares about something that I don't technically have the ability to remember. Suicide attempt. I was really not expecting to survive. I had done my homework and my mother had enough of the right combination of painkillers to stop the heart of a small elephant. And then I woke up. Everything was hazy, and I had a catheter, but I don't really remember anything until I got to the mental hospital. That was 5 years ago. I'm better now. This was back in 2012. I was a bartender at the time. I kicked out a guy and his buddy after one of them flipped out and lost his crap over a bet in a game of pool. He was acting pretty aggressive and when I started to come out for behind the bar to escort him out, he threw his bar glass at her. I closed the bar down about an hour later. As I was walking out the back door, there he was, about 10 feet from me and still peed off that I had tossed him out. That's the last thing I remember. All the other details came from my GF who had called 911 and saw the whole thing go down. I blacked out. When I came to, I had been told that I had been stabbed 5x and had the top of my ear cut off. I was in local hospital getting stapled stitches and waiting to be transported to other hospital to have my ear reattached. Right before I was about to be transported, the police came into her and told me found the guy. He still had the bloody knife in his pocket and a bunch of prescription drugs in his hotel room. I was going out with some friends on my 21st birthday. We were pre-gaming and they fed me a lot of shots. We hop in a cab and set to go out to the clubs. Next thing I know, I wake in a hospital bed. The moment I opened my eyes I knew where I was and how I probably got there. Turns out, I jumped out of the cab prematurely and hit my head. I didn't have any physical marks on me, nor did my head hurt, not even a hangover. IVs will solve hangovers like nobody's business. Instant hydration. Woke up in hospital sheets covering my body and not remembering how I got there. Once they said I got into an accident I toughed. I was driving in my SUV and I kept asking if I hurt anyone else and who was with me. Once they said I was in my motorcycle I then noticed I was covered in sheets and kept asking if all my body parts were attached. Then once they said yes I kept trying to figure out how it happened. By that time my mom and sis were there and kept asking to see my helmet and stuff trying to figure out how it happened. Kept repeating all the questions many times forgetting I had asked them. Had a concussion and torn muscle on my arm and banged up pretty bad. Though they kept me in hospital for 2 days as my heart rate would not go down. Potassium deficiency was the cause. Memories slowly came back within few days. Didn't lose my memory, just the events of that day. Still to this day I can't recall the actual accident. I just remember being held down on the road by people and me begging them to move me as I was burning in oil from my bike. Then ambulance arriving and paramedics trying to keep me awake. What had happened was that a car in the middle lane decided to go into the corner gas station, crossing the right lane and the turning lane. And I was in the right lane. Hit the back right tire area, running into the car helmet first and bouncing back onto the concrete, cracking my helmet. Yay for helmets. Frick concussions and losing my young guy immortality mind. H overdose. Woke up to EMTs slapping my face a bit after the naloxone didn't seem to work right away, but it just took a minute. I jumped up and tried leaving the scene but was too frick to make it more than 3 steps. EMTs were super cool and settled me down. Cops came and one of the paramedics explained I had overdosed on my meds cause I had a legal script of a pan on me for my knee. Once the police were distracted, one of the EMTs told me about his sister being an addict and gave me a card for a Suboxone clinic. I owe that man my life for real. Drank too much and fell off a horse. A metal statue of a horse in Vegas. You have been visited by the distinguished doggo of delicious delicacies. Comment tasty supper, pupper, and be blessed with delectable dishes for the next decade. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.